right. Well, good morning. Welcome back to the 126 Collective. I am very excited for today's lesson. I've been preparing for the last couple of weeks. Last time we talked about Abraham, and certainly his story covered many, many chapters in the Old Testament. And we sort of selected which particular facet of his life we were going to focus on. And I did the same with Joseph. So Joseph, his story actually goes through many chapters of the Old Testament in the book of Genesis as well. But we're going to kind of focus. I'm going to give you an overview of his story, but we're going to kind of focus on one facet of this. So I'm going to start today by sharing the uh, the part of Genesis that I want to focus on for today. I'm calling it Joseph, the Dreamer and the Dream. And so this comes from the book of Genesis, chapter 37, and this is verses 3 through 20. When Joseph was 17 years old, he often tended his father's flocks. He worked for his half-brothers, the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brothers were doing. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day, Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. One night, Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. "Listen to this dream," he said. "We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly, my bundle stood up, and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before mine." His brothers responded, "So you think you'll be our king, do you? Do you actually think you will reign over us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. Soon Joseph had another dream, and again he told his brothers about it. "Listen, I've had another dream," he said. "The sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed low before me." This time he told the dream to his father as well as to his brothers. But his father scolded him. "What kind of dream is that?" he asked. "Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you?" But while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father wondered what the dreams meant. Soon after this, Joseph's brothers went to pasture their father's flocks at Shechem. When they had been gone for some time, Jacob said to Joseph, "Your brothers are pasturing the sheep at Shechem. Get ready, and I will send you to them." "I'm ready to go." "Go and see how your brothers and the flocks are getting along," Jacob said. "Then come back and bring me a report." So Jacob sent him on his way, and Joseph traveled to Shechem from their home in the valley of Hebron. When he arrived there, a man from the area noticed him wandering around the countryside. "What are you looking for?" he asked. "I'm looking for my brothers," Joseph replied. "Do you know where they are pasturing their sheep?" "Yes," the man told him. "They've moved on from here, but I heard them say, 'Let's go on to Dothan.'" So Joseph followed his brothers to Dothan and found them there. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. As he approached, they made plans to kill him. "Here comes the dreamer," they said. "Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns. We can tell our father a wild animal has eaten him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." So this is the very beginning of Joseph's story. And I think it's interesting because most of us have heard the story of Joseph and the Coat of Many Colors, or the Broadway production Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Um, but this sort of talks about where that comes from. So I'm going to give you a little bit of context, and then we are going to move on, and we're going to talk um, about Joseph and his dreams. So I want to start with this concept that leadership begins with revelation. So the word revelation comes from the Greek word apocalypsis, which means just simply disclosure or unveiling or revealing. That's where that word comes from. And I like to geek out on the Greek and the Aramaic and see what these words actually mean. And so what we're talking about here is that the dream is actually revealed to Joseph. Okay. The dream is given to him. And so my question to you as we start today's lesson is to think about, what dreams do you have? We're focusing this series on leadership. And so I'm going to always come at this from a business perspective, but it could be your personal life as well. But generally, we have dreams that we manufacture, right? Like we set goals that we want or think we need to set. You guys have heard me talk about this quite a bit. And then there are goals that are actually in alignment with who we are and what we want our lives to be about. So the question then becomes, what are the dreams that you have that feel like they've been given to you from somewhere else? So as we kind of move through today's lessons, that's what I want you to think about. So Joseph is young, right? He's only 17 years old. He's the favored son for whatever reason. Maybe it's because he was a tattletale, right? I started the story with telling you how he was pasturing the flocks with his brothers, and he went back and gave his father a bad report of some of the things that they were doing. We don't know why. Part of it says because he was the child of his old age. So at this point, Jacob, also called Israel, his name has changed to Israel at some point. This is the one of his last sons. And so, for whatever reason, Joseph is the favored son. And so, twice we're told in that little section I just read to you that Joseph had a dream. And in the Bible, dreams are often vehicles of divine direction, meaning when people get dreams, they're being told something that's going to happen. So, some of you may know the story of the birth of Jesus. And what we're told is that an angel appears to Mary and tells her she's going to bear this child. But Joseph has a dream. And in that dream, he's told, go ahead and marry her, right? This is important. And so oftentimes these dreams that we read about in scripture are basically divine foreshadowings of what's going to happen. So, I want you to be thinking about dreams that seem to be given to you, but they were not created by you. Those are the important things. And so if we think about this from a leadership perspective, what I'd ask you to be considering is that a God-given dream, right? A dream that's given to you is generally bigger than you're ready to handle. It's bigger than your current level of maturity. It's bigger than the current level of experience you have. That's why it's a dream. Right? If not, it would just be a task. But if it's bigger than you and you feel like you're not ready for it yet, that's a sign. That's a sign. Okay. Also, character is developed slowly. So Joseph is given this dream at 17. He's young, he's inexperienced. Clearly, he is sharing his dream inappropriately and with the wrong people. He's very immature, okay? But his character is going to develop slowly throughout many more chapters in the book of Genesis until some of you may know, and I'll give you this context in a little bit, that he becomes basically the governor of Egypt. But that doesn't happen overnight, right? So his character is developed slowly. And some of you also may remember in the story of Jesus that we fast forward from his birth essentially till he's 12 years old. And his parents lose him for a few days. Now, of course, they traveled in big caravans, so it could be easy to understand how that could happen. But when they find him, he's in the temple in Jerusalem teaching. He's teaching, and he's 12 years old. So it says there, though, that as he goes home, he respects and honors his parents, and he grows in wisdom and character. So we know that that is happening slowly over time. And then, of course, the dream is just a preview of what's to come, but the process is the preparation, right? And so I want you to think about this. What dream has been placed in you? What dream has come to you that currently feels larger than you're able to handle? So I'm going to give you a second to think about that, because I think it's important. If we're going to be able to achieve greater things, if we're going to be able to step into roles of leadership, if we're going to build scalable, sustainable, growing businesses, if we're ultimately going to build a team of people around us to help us achieve those goals, it's very likely that right now you don't feel capable of doing it. Does that make sense? There are things that seem beyond our control, and then we reach for them. What often happens is that because they feel beyond our control, because we don't feel ready, because we feel like we don't have enough experience or expertise, we tend to push those things away and think they're not for me. Those are for other people. But what I want you to be thinking about is there probably, if we had time, we could really go back and think about other times in your life when you can look back now over 5, 10, 20 years and realize that you actually made great progress. You achieved something really big, but it took time for you to get there. But I bet if you could get in a time machine and go backwards, you would see that there was a point in the beginning where it felt like it was unreachable or it was beyond your capability, right? Anybody else besides me? Can you recognize that's probably the case? Yeah, that's probably the case. So that's where we start with the dream. All right. Now I want to go on to step two, which is the dysfunction. I love alliteration, so I came up with all the D words I could think of. And so, we're told that Jacob, Israel, right? He loved Joseph more than any of his other sons. Plus, he got that coat. Now, one thing you need to know about that coat is the kind of coat, as it's described, would be worn by someone who does not work because it had long sleeves. And so if you have long sleeves, your chances are you're not getting dirty. You're not putting your hands in the earth. You're not milking a sheep. You're not hurting the sheep. You're not doing those things. So what's more important is less that it was colorful and all those things. And it's understanding that he was given something that would indicate he was the chosen boy, right? He's not doing the same work that his many brothers are doing, right? He has 11 brothers, and so he's the one that's not having to work. So of course you can imagine why his brothers would have been extremely jealous of him. In fact, we're shown that they actually hate him, and they couldn't even speak a kind word to him. That's how deep their jealousy went. We know that in some regard he's a tattletale. He's daddy's favorite. He's got this beautiful coat that no one else has. You can see how his brothers might have been jealous of him. So, what I want you to think about as we talk about this is where do you feel like perhaps you have some talent? So, I'm going to use the word talent in place of the word favor. Where do you believe that you may have some talent, some skill, some ability that would allow you to have this bigger dream? And yet you feel like you're in the people pile. John Maxwell talks a lot about being in the people pile. And he says if you want to be successful, you got to get out of the people pile, right? Does that make sense? You're in the pile with all the other people, and there's something in you that's like, I want more. You're standing around the coffee pot or the water cooler, and everybody's talking about their customers or they're complaining about the market or the business or whatever. And there's something in you that's resistant to that. And you're thinking, maybe something's wrong with me, or I don't want to appear arrogant, or who am I to think? But yet there's something in you that yearns for more, right? Do you feel alone in the people pile? But here's the truth. If you have talent, but you don't have the wisdom and discernment with how to direct it, you're just going to be isolated, right? Joseph was isolated because he had this talent, he had this favor, but because he was so brash about it, we'll talk about that, because he was trying to tell his brothers how it was going to be, he didn't get out of that people pile. And so he just ended up isolating himself from the rest of the family. So we have to have that wisdom and discernment, because when you're visible like that, you're going to feel that resistance from others potentially. Here's the truth. Not everyone is going to celebrate your dream. And I'm not just talking about other people in your industry, your coworkers, your colleagues. I'm talking about even family members, even the people who truly love you. We'll talk about why that might be, but not everyone else celebrates your dream. right? You've probably all heard the story. I don't know how much truth there is to it about the crabs in the pot, right? As the water turns up to boiling, the crabs that are trying to climb out of the pot, the other crabs pull them down. I don't know if that's actually scientific, but we understand that. If you're trying to sort of get out of the people pile and you're talking about what you want to do, other people may be trying to pull you back down. It's for their own reasons, even though they may act like it's for your own good. But I want you to understand that. So Joseph's mistake was not dreaming. That wasn't the problem. It was premature broadcasting, right? He was telling people about his dreams that were not really in alignment or were not emotionally mature enough to understand what he was talking about. So, in verse 8 of what I read to you earlier, the his brothers say, "Do you actually think you will reign over us?" Right? So think about the dream. It was his sheaf of wheat is now all the other sheaves of wheat are bowing down to it. And then the sun, the moon, and the stars are all bowing down to him. And so his brothers and even his father to a degree are interpreting his destiny as domination, right? This is so important for you as a leader because sometimes in the early stage of sort of planning and envisioning and dreaming for your business and for your life, you can confuse excitement with discernment, right? Have you ever had a vision, had a goal, had a dream, and you were so excited about it that you told everybody, and other people didn't respond in the way that you thought they might. They didn't catch fire to your vision. So it's so critical that you don't confuse excitement with discernment. You've got to step back. You've got to think things through. Early stage dreamers often share their vision before building trust. So if you're talking to your team, for example, or you want to build a team and you're talking to your colleagues about doing that, and you're just blurting out your vision, your dream for what your business could be, before you've got the trust of those around you, don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if people take it the wrong way. Who do you think you are? Right? And maybe you even say that to yourself, or maybe your family says it to you. People who actually, care about you, but they don't understand. They don't understand the depth of your vision. And then another mistake that early stage dreamers make is overexposing their vision to underqualified ears. Underqualified ears. We're going to talk about this in a little bit when we go through some of John Maxwell's work in his book, Put Your Dream to the Test. Okay. But you're in the people pile. You got to get out of the people pile. But the people around you, you've got to be very careful who you're sharing your vision with. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 27 says, "The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint." So Joseph had the revelation. He had the dream. He just didn't have the restraint. So not every dream needs a microphone. Some dreams need to incubate, but there's got to be somebody. So my question to you is, who has earned the right to hear your dreams? Who's earned the right? Because when you have a vision for your business or for your life, but we'll kind of stick with business here. When you have that vision, whether you want to build a team, whether you want to scale your business, whatever it might be, whether you want to start a new business, whatever it looks like to you, there are some people that need to earn the right to hear that dream. And it can be exciting. It's bubbling up within you. Clearly, that was the case with Joseph. He wanted to tell his brothers about his exciting dream. What he didn't understand, that he was too immature. He was too young. And obviously for him, it was his age, but some of us are young leaders. And so we've got to be very careful who we're willing to share that with. So do you have a coach? Do you have a mentor? Somebody that you can truly trust that has actually earned the right to hear your dream. And you got to share that carefully. Okay, so let's go to step 3. So we had the dream. We know what the dysfunction is. Now let's go to the development. And so the pit that Joseph finds himself in is part of the process. I don't like it. You probably don't like it either. But could we all agree that in terms of learning and growing and stretching yourself, you often end up in the pit? Anybody besides me ever ended up in the pit on the process to learning something? Yeah, most of us have gone there. So before Joseph ends up in the palace as the governor of Egypt, he goes through rejection, betrayal. He finds himself in a pit. He ends up in slavery. He is falsely accused. We'll talk about that. And he ends up in prison. So you may have found yourself not necessarily literally in those places, but in the process of becoming, in the process of building your business, in the process of growing into your dream for yourself, for your business, for your life, your health, your finances, your marriage, whatever it might be, you might have found yourself experiencing something like that, right? Like you feel like the people that should be on your side, the people that should have your back, it feels like they betray you. Maybe they tell your dream to someone else and you sort of feel like you're being mocked for it. Maybe you find yourself in the pit. You fall flat on your face and you're ready to turn around and run. Maybe you find yourself with a dream that's so big, but you're unwilling to find the right people to help you realize it, that now you're enslaved by it. I've been in this business in and around the real estate world, and I know not everybody that joins our calls is in the real estate industry, but most of the people are either there or they're self-employed or they have a small business. That's sort of my jam for folks. But the reality is that there are many people who get into business for themselves for the right reasons, right? They love people, they want to serve people, they really want to make a difference, they want to have an impact, they want to make some money. But they're willing to let go of that tight control over everything. My customers will only work with me. I'm the brand, and so therefore I'm responsible for everything. And then they end up enslaved by that very business that they wanted to grow. And they're working 7 days a week, right? They're taking calls at all hour of the day or night. They have no breathing room. So Joseph's story is a good example. It's part of the process. I want to help you to break through that. And we can learn from him so that we don't have to make all of those mistakes. So his brothers say at one point, come on, let's kill him. Let's kill him. They want to actually kill him. The dream attracted adversity. Because here's the truth. Sometimes a person's destiny disrupts the insecurity of the other people around them, right? We're right back to the people pile. Do the people around you support your goals? There's a great book called The One Thing, written by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. It's a great book if you haven't read it. It goes into a lot of science about how do you determine what your one thing is, and then how do you devote the appropriate amount of time and attention to that so that you can accomplish the most important thing. And so one of the things they talk about in The One Thing is that your environment must support your goals. So does your environment support the goals that you have around you? So there's a distance between your dreams, your vision, your goals, and the fulfillment of those things. There's a space between those things. In that space, right? So many of us want to achieve what we want tomorrow or yesterday. Like we're a part of a instant gratification world, right? We can. How many of you have ordered something on Amazon in the last couple of days or the last week, and it gets there? Some of you same day, next day, but it's almost immediate. We are able to get the things that we want instantly. And so that process of working to achieve a goal, especially if you go online, look on social media, go on YouTube, there's people telling you can make X amount of dollars, working from home 3 days a week, and you're not even going to be doing anything difficult to get there. We know those are lies, but that's just kind of what gets in our head. So that space is super important. That's the law of process, which we're going to talk about. That's where your character is refined. That's where your ego gets squashed or diminished or diluted or something, right? That's where your faith is truly tested. And that's where leadership is actually built, right? Leadership doesn't happen in a day. It doesn't happen in a day. So what Joseph needed and what some of us need in regard to our dreams is we need some humility before we take on the authority. We need some humility. We need to learn how to steward things. We need to learn how to steward our gifts. We talked about that in our second session on the parable of the talents. We need to learn how to use what we've been given. And we need to develop some integrity before we're going to truly have influence. John Maxwell says that leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. And so here's what happens. By the time we get to chapter 41, Joseph's story starts in chapter 37, but by the time we get to chapter 41, when Joseph is now being called by Pharaoh to become the governor of all of Egypt, what we understand is that the dream didn't change, right? Because remember the dream, he was going to be ruling over all of his brothers, and the sun, moon, and stars would bow down to him. All of those things do end up happening, by the way. The dream didn't change. Joseph changed. Does that make sense? The dream didn't change, but he changed. So my question to you is what pit might actually be preparation? If you find yourself maybe in a place where you're not achieving your goals, or maybe you don't even know how to set the right goals. Maybe what you want, you don't think you can actually achieve, or maybe you failed. Maybe last year wasn't your best year. Maybe you're not sure where to go next. Maybe you hired some people and they were the wrong people, and now you've lost them. You're back to square one. I don't know what pit you might find yourself in right now. Maybe you're new to the business that you're in, and you have ideas, you have visions, you see other people, right? I am in Atlanta right now at a very large real estate conference. There are people here. I think there's about 15,000 people here. There are people here that have wild success, at least from what I can see. I don't know what went into that. I don't know what pits they went in along the way, but maybe you're looking at people in your industry and thinking, how can I do what they do? They have more intelligence, more experience, more knowledge than I do. Maybe that's a pit for you. But here's the truth. Maybe that pit is preparing you for what's next. Maybe that is your preparation. So I want to look now, I want to kind of look at some of John Maxwell's work. So John Maxwell's written, I think, almost 100 books at this point. John's wisdom is, it's very simple. It's not easy, but it's very simple. And I think you guys know I'm an executive director with the John Maxwell team. So I love diving deep into John's work and learning from him because he's the leadership guru, right? Everyone turns to John Maxwell when they want to talk about leadership. And so he's written a couple of great books I want to talk about today. And the first one is The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And in that book, I think Joseph's story is a great example of the law of process. And the law of process says leadership develops daily, not in a day. So I think whether you ever want to build a team, whatever business you're in, you have a team. You have colleagues, you have customers, you probably have other businesses that support your business. Whatever that is for you, that's your team. Whether or not you think you ever want to grow a business that's large enough that you no longer can do it by yourself, your leadership skill, your success is going to be determined by how well you learn to lead. By the way, the same goes in your family, right? All of us need to be leading better in our families, in our communities. I think everyone could agree we need great leaders at all levels of society. And so just a sort of a quick timeline for Joseph so you'll understand. And you can go and read more about him if you want to check him out in the book of Genesis in the Old Testament from chapters 37 through 41, 42 or so. It'll lay this out. But here's what happens. His brothers don't kill him. They actually sell him into slavery. So he ends up in Egypt serving in a man named Potiphar, serving in the house of Potiphar. And there he starts to grow and he begins to earn respect and trust of Potiphar, who is very high up in Pharaoh's court. Well, I'm sorry, Potiphar's wife takes a liking to Joseph, and she tries to get him to, have sex with her. He refuses, but then she screams, attack, assault, whatever. And so she falsely accuses him of that, and he ends up in prison. In prison, he even becomes the leader of all the prisoners. Like, this guy's a leader. It was revealed to him at 17, 3 times now, right? He tells his dreams to his brothers. They sell him into slavery. He becomes a leader in Potiphar's house. He ends up in prison. Um, and he becomes a leader in prison. So every time he gets knocked back, he just grows stronger and stronger. He never gives up. Years later, right, he ends up interpreting some dreams for Pharaoh. And in those dreams, he's able to predict 7 years of abundance followed by 7 years of famine. And so he says, what you need to do is in the next 7 years where there's abundance, you need to set aside a lot of extra grain because it's going to be followed by 7 years of famine. So Pharaoh now puts him in charge. He is now the governor of Egypt. Again, he's growing in his ability to lead. He becomes essentially second in command only to Pharaoh. Fast forward a few years when we get to the 7 years of famine, guess who makes the trip to Egypt looking for some food? It's Joseph's brothers. So when they meet him, they don't know it's him. They don't recognize him. Of course, years have passed. And of course, he's the second in command. They assume at this point he's probably dead or he's enslaved in some foreign land. So the story gets very exciting and dramatic at this point, and ultimately Joseph reveals himself to his brothers. In the meantime, they have now bowed down to him, just as his dream predicted. And so he forgives his brothers. His father comes, and they all realize he's the one that's going to keep them alive. They bring their entire family, and the entire nation that grows from there ends up in Egypt. Some of you know that they're going to be in Egypt for a long time, but they end up there in the beginning because of Joseph's leadership and the fulfillment of his dreams. So you can learn more about that there. But Joseph goes from the dream through the dysfunction, through his development. When he's in Egypt, he's going through the daily grind. He's serving in Potiphar's house. He's serving in prison. Now he's serving Pharaoh. And ultimately, his deployment, right? His deployment, meaning now he has become the leader that was foretold in those dreams when he was 17 years old. So when Pharaoh calls for Joseph to come, Joseph is ready, not because of the dreams that he had, but because of the years in which he's grown. That's the law of process. Okay, so the law of process teaches us how to have emotional control. Joseph didn't have emotional control when he was 17. He was blurting out his dreams to anybody who would listen. He didn't have discernment. He didn't. So we learn to have that level of discernment as time goes by. Joseph learned operational competence, right? So you learn how to do more as time goes by. And of course, Joseph had to learn the people skills. And you and I have to do that as well. If leadership is influence and people are only allowing themselves to be influenced by people that they trust, then we have to learn those skills over time. So here's the takeaway for that. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I gave you guys some fill in the blanks there. And that is this: you don't arrive at influence because of vision, right? You don't get to influence because you had this vision. You arrive because of preparation. For you and I, for each of us, we have to learn that there's a time gap between the dream and the fulfillment of the dream. That the space in between that is super important. The bigger the dream, probably the longer the process. Does that make sense? So we have to be willing to do the work to get there. So my question is there anything in your dream that you're doing where you're trying to skip a process? Some people want to hire too soon. They're not ready. They don't even have their systems in place. Some people wait until they're too busy to hire, and then they hire the first person that walks by. It may have happened to you. It's happened to quite a few of my clients. I've been coaching full time for almost 16 years now, and there have been many times that people they don't know how to let go. They have a vision, they have a dream. They are growing a business because they're really good at serving people. And then they get to the point where they find them that they're so busy they can no longer serve at a high level. And so they just end up hiring the first person that comes along. And it's the wrong person. So they're skipping the process. They don't want to take the time to really review resumes, to have a DISC assessment done, to understand what are the personality types that are going to be best suited for this job and for this team. So is there any part of your business right now where you're trying to skip ahead and not go through the process of learning? It's important to understand. All right. So I want to look real quick at another one of John Maxwell's books, and this one's called Put Your Dream to the Test. Put Your Dream to the Test. Another great book. And so what was great in preparing for this is I got to go back to this book and read through all of my notes and all of my highlights. So it was wonderful to go back and really just figure out which of the questions, because it's 10 questions in the book, to help you understand if your dream is worth pursuing. And so I chose 3 of the questions that I think best exemplify Joseph's story. And so this is a quote from the book. John Maxwell says, "A dream worth pursuing is a picture and a blueprint of your purpose and potential." Right? All of us have a purpose. Would you agree that you have a purpose? We studied in our first session, if you were with us, on Genesis 1:26, which is how I got the name for this group, that we were created to have dominion. We were created to rule. We were created to lead, every last one of us. And so our purpose is to lead in some capacity. And our potential. So each of us were given a potential. John Maxwell says that God's gift to us is our potential, and our gift to God is realizing that potential. So a dream worth pursuing actually will show you what your purpose and what your potential truly are. That's how you can tell, by the way, if it's your dream, not somebody else's. So that's question 1, the ownership question. Is your dream really your dream? How many of you have had dreams that were put on you by someone else? Like, you should have this goal. You should do this. You shouldn't do that. Like I always tell my clients, when you're meeting someone else in your industry and you talk to them about what your plans or what your vision or what your goals or dreams are, if they say, well, what you need to do is, that's not what we're looking for. Now, what I would be interested in knowing is when someone says to you, well, let me share my experience. Let me share my experience. Right? That's a lot better than someone telling you what you need to do. I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. I want them to help me self-discover it. But along the way, I'd like to learn from their experience. Because if not, you're going to end up with somebody else putting a dream on you. Maybe someone who cares deeply about you. Maybe they see some talent or potential in you. And so they're telling you what your dream should be. Or maybe you have a well-meaning manager or someone that leads you, or someone, it could be even a coach or a mentor who's giving you what your goals should be. I've been in rooms before where they'll ask you to, come up with your goal for your business. I used to be a realtor, so I know how this goes. And they'll tell you to write it down. And then they will say, now cross it out and double it. And that sounds really good. And it's, the big, hairy, audacious goal. But some of you have heard me talk about this. Your BS meter is going off big time, because if that goal is not aligned with what you really want in your life, it's not your goal. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't stretch ourselves. Most of us can probably push ourselves a little harder than we do, right? There's times we need to stretch. But I'm talking about, is your dream really your dream and not somebody else's dream? The reason that Joseph's dream survived all that he went through is because it wasn't his. It was given to him. Okay. Here's the truth, though. Dreams are fragile, especially when they're new. So again, that's kind of like we talked about before. There are people who won't support your goals, maybe because they're jealous, maybe because it reveals to them their own insecurity. and they realize that they're not setting big enough goals for themselves, or maybe they love you and they don't want you to fail, right? I don't know how many of you are parents. Show of hands, everybody who are parents out there. I mean, don't we all want our kids to be wildly successful? I think everyone does. I've never met anyone who says, I hope my kid falls flat on their face. But we all know at some level that if we don't let them fall, they're never going to learn. If you when you learn to ride a bike, this is why, look, we can talk about helmets another time, but elbow pads and knee pads and all that stuff, how's a kid going to learn to ride a bike if they don't scrape their knees? I mean, it's part of the process. That pain, that failure is what leads them to success. Remember when your toddler started walking, right? They fell more than they didn't. And they busted their chin on the coffee table and they did all those things. It's part of that. So, yet there's a part of all of us that wants our kids to be successful and never experience failure, even though we know they have to. So sometimes people who care about you, they just don't want you to fail. So they don't support your goals. They don't support your vision or your dreams because they don't want to see you be hurt. So make sure that you're not sharing your dream too soon or with someone who will not support you, even if they're well-meaning. Right? And is your dream compelling? The Bible says without a vision, people perish. Here's the truth. We want a dream that is so compelling that it pulls us forward. That's a pull goal versus a push goal, right? We all know what that feels like to have to push ourselves to do something. I want a dream that's so compelling, it pulls you forward and you don't have to get behind yourself and push yourself to do it, right? I'm not saying you won't have to stretch and all of that, but I want you to know that if your dream isn't worthwhile, if it's not inspiring or compelling, it's probably not really your dream. All right. And then the second question is the cost question. There's a cost for our dreams. Are you willing to pay the price? The price that Joseph paid included his reputation. It included his comfort. I mean, he spent a lot of time in jail. It included his freedom and his time. So are you willing to pay the price? Because dreams demand payment before they deliver dividends. So are you willing to pay the price? I love this quote from actor Paul Hogan. You know this one's old. This was the guy, in case you don't remember, he was in Crocodile Dundee. And he said, the secret to my success is that I bit off more than I could chew, and I chewed as fast as I could. Right? So your dream has to be big enough that it's going to cost you something. If it's not worth having. Don't we all agree that people who pay attention? We all know that saying. And we all understand that the more we pay for something, the more valuable we consider it. Does a Hyundai cost as much as a Mercedes? Those things that we believe are worth having cost more money. We all know that. Which, by the way, if you happen to be in the real estate business or you're a consultant of any kind, are you charging as the least amount you can to win by cost? Are you pricing yourself like a commodity? Or are you understanding that the more people pay for something, the more they will actually honor and respect it? Okay, but that's maybe a different story, a different conversation. But your dream generally is outside of your comfort zone. Right? Because again, if it wasn't outside of your comfort zone, it would just be a to-do list. It would just be a task. So I want you to understand that it's going to cost you something. And the most important thing to remember here is that your values have to govern your dream, not the other way around. So you got to know what those non-negotiables are. But once you've identified what your core values are for your business and for your life, then you can make sure that those values govern your dream so that when you pay the price, it's not a price you don't want to pay. Right? The Bible says, what does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul in the process? And we all know that. All of us, generally, anybody who's on my calls is going to be someone who works for themselves. And we all understand how easily your business can take over your life. It's very simple for that to happen. So it's finding that there's a tension between your dream and the price you need to pay to achieve it and your values and what really matters to you. There's a tension there. right? It's a good tension to have. But if you're not clear on your values, it can be easy to overpay. Nobody wants to overpay. All right. And then number 3 is the tenacity question. And the tenacity question is, am I moving closer to my dream? So Joseph kept leading wherever he was planted. He didn't wait for these ideal circumstances to practice leadership. That's a sign of maturity. So are you moving closer to your dream day by day by day? Right. So I tried to find the source of this quote, but it's kind of all over the internet. Doesn't seem to know exactly who said it. It's been attributed to a number of people, but I love it. I got it from the book, and it says, it's been said that there's no insurmountable barrier except our inherent lack of persistence. Right? The only barrier that we cannot breach, the only obstacle we can't overcome ultimately is our own lack of persistence. So are you moving closer to your dream? Are you persistent? Are you tenacious? Are you day by day, step by step, taking the small steps, taking the actions that are going to lead you closer to your dream? All right, so let's wrap it up here, and then we'll open up for some comments and questions. So when I say young leaders, I don't necessarily mean in age, right? Leadership can begin. Some leaders don't even begin the leadership conversation until they're well into adulthood. So I mean young as in inexperience. Young leaders fall in love with the spotlight, but mature leaders fall in love with the process. I've seen a lot of people that have shelves of trophies behind them. The level of significance that they need to feel like they're okay is high. There's nothing really wrong with that, except it does show perhaps a lack of maturity, because you get to the point as in leadership and in business where you realize everything's a process. I got to be taking daily steps towards the achievement of my goal. Nightingale said that progress is the development. Wait a minute, I'm going to say it wrong. That success is the worthy pursuit of a goal, right? It's daily, step by step, pursuing that goal. And then Joseph started as a dreamer with enthusiasm, but he became a leader with wisdom. So I want you to have enthusiasm for your dream, but ultimately the wisdom is what's going to allow you to become a great leader. And then the dream is given in a moment, but the leader is built over years. Years. Are you willing to put in the time? So if this dream is given to you by God, then hold on to it. But let that process grow you into the kind of leader who can carry that big dream. So, I'm closing with this, another verse from the book of Proverbs, and it says, commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans. And what I think about when I think about that is that if I come up with the goal, the dream, the vision, whatever, I'm not going to let it go. I'm holding on to it with clenched white knuckle, right? But if the dream is given to me and I understand that as time goes by, I'll be given everything I need to achieve it. Because remember, we've talked about this in prior sessions, that your talent and your desire is pretty good indication of what you're here to do. Most of us don't have a dream that's so outside of the realm of possibility we would never achieve it. I've never had a dream to become an NFL quarterback. Like, that's just never been in my awareness. I've never had a dream to be a rocket scientist. Like, there's just some things that I've never wanted to do. I've found that everything I really, really want to do that really feels like something that's maybe it's beyond where I am today, but it is out there. I have found that ultimately I ended up with the skill set and the desire to actually do it. Do you think there's a coincidence there? That the things you really want to achieve and the things you really want to, the goals you really want to set for yourselves are generally in alignment with what your talents, skills, gifts, and abilities are. So if I'm willing to surrender that dream, for me, it's to God, right? If I'm willing to surrender it, then that dream is going to deepen over time because I'm not pretending as if it's mine or that I made it up. In other words, it's not all about me. Because I've learned the lesson, if I can't lay something down, then I probably shouldn't pick it up to begin with. I hope that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so I want to open up now because I've covered a lot of ground here, and I hope I've inspired you to want to learn more about Joseph and his story. But now I want to hear from you guys for a few minutes. What, if anything, today has resonated with you? What questions or thoughts do you have? Don't let me down. Eric, what you got?
Well, I'm just thinking about some of the dreams that I've, or aspirations I've had over the course of my life, and how I've pursued them. And it's really only within the past 4 or 5 years that I've stopped to consider that perhaps I could have some dreams. My objective was always been to, survive and to make enough money to support my family and my life. And so it's like I said, just recently that I've really taken the time to slow down and think, what are God's plans for me? Have I been ignoring his voice for so long that I really can't hear what he's saying anymore? And what do I have to do to slow down enough to clear that channel and receive what he's trying to give to me?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, we are coming out of, gosh, a good decade plus of hustle and grind, right? It was the messaging on all the motivational speakers and all of the folks out there that we were listening to. They were like, sleep when you're dead, grind your way to success, do more, work harder. And I don't know about you guys, but like I'm done. I'm done with that. I'm exhausted. I love to work hard. But I want to more be in alignment with the person I was created to be. Maybe it's my age, I don't know, but I still want to work hard. I love working hard. But truthfully, if that's all I'm focused on, then guess who it's all about? It's all about me. It's all about me. And so yeah, so what you're saying too is like if what your goal is to survive, you know what I mean?
Right. I'm still looking for that. Um, they say if you do what you love, then you won't work another day in your life. And I'm still trying to figure out what it is I love because I don't mind working. Obviously, I've worked hard all my life, but I've worked hard to do, things that I felt like needed to be done, not that I really wanted to do. So I've spent some time in introspection over the past 18 to 24 months trying to figure out what is it that really excites me. Not working for uh, and I actually wrote this down earlier today, not working for money, but working for joy and peace, and then figuring out what gives me joy and peace, and doing more of that. So, as you said, I'm getting older and I don't feel like working anymore, but I know that I have plenty left to contribute, and if I could just figure out the path that I need to be on, where it doesn't feel like work yet, it can produce for me the joy and satisfaction that I'm looking for out of life. Because ultimately, that's where I want to be. Fame and fortune won't do it. You can have all the money in the world and you can be as famous and popular as you want, but there's plenty of examples of people in those positions that are desperately unhappy. And just recently, we've seen some famous people die, as they've gotten older that have accomplished a lot in film and things of that nature, but have died ugly deaths because they just, you know, weren't doing things that fulfilled them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important. It goes back to the values, right? So understanding what are my core values? What is the North Star that's guiding my life? And then what is the North Star that needs to guide my business? I have said that success is when the line between work and play is so blurred that nobody can tell the difference. But again, that doesn't mean that for me, working hard is not part of it. I love to work hard. If it's something that feels like it's aligned with who I am. right? I mean, I could get to that place where I feel like, working hard to me may be trying to establish something. We were talking about this, I was talking about this earlier with a friend, having a YouTube channel or all these other things. It could feel like, well, I need to have those things in order to be successful. And I'm not saying I don't, but I want to make sure if I'm going to go down a road like that, that the hard work required lines up with who I am, lines up with what I believe God is asking me to do. And if it doesn't, then I don't want to exert any energy towards it. So it doesn't mean, like you're saying, it doesn't mean that you won't have to work hard. It just means, and it doesn't mean it's going to come easy. Joseph is that's the lesson I want everybody to leave here today with. Joseph's life was not easy. It wasn't easy. But it was a process. But no matter what happened, no matter how many pits he fell in and how many times he went to prison, he learned something there, and he took that with him into the next version of himself. So wherever you are in your life, whether you're 25 or 65, all the things you've learned along the way, maybe it's time to stop and look backwards and think, what are some of the big lessons I've learned? What am I bringing with me into this next phase of my life, whatever it might be,
I also
right?
think it's significant that Joseph was he was principled because at various times throughout that experience, he could have shifted directions and escaped some of the hardship that he endured. Like when Potiphar's wife one came after him, he could have just said, "Yeah, don't tell anybody," and went ahead and did it. But
Yep.
he pissed her off so bad that she grabbed his robe and he ran away naked and got thrown into jail. And that was obviously an injustice. But rather than pursue that, he just went to jail. And then because of his principles, he automatically rose up within the prison population and was given positions of responsibility. So much so that he came in contact with the cupbearer and the other guy,
The baker.
the baker. And then one of them goes up and forgets all about him. It wasn't until the second guy went up and said, "Oh yeah, I remember this guy in jail who used to interpret our dreams. Maybe he can help you out." And he goes in front of Pharaoh, and Pharaoh says, "I'm not even going to tell you the dream. I want you to interpret it for me anyway. Let's see how good you really are."
Yeah, you're right. So, I want to kind of leave us with this today. Go learn some more from Joseph because he's just got a great, exciting story. So much so that obviously somebody wrote a very famous Broadway play about him. I don't know, I haven't seen that in so long. I don't know how accurate it was, but I think there's so many lessons we can learn about that. But I really want to ask you to put your own dream to the test, right? So next time, I think we're going to look at somebody who might have something to teach us on the other side of what not to do. And certainly, what I hope you take away from Joseph is that you're not going to do it perfectly in the beginning, but you got to keep going. You got to keep going. The process is what is going to perfect you so that when the opportunity comes for you to be deployed, for you to be called upon, to step into a greater version of yourself or to step into leadership, you're ready for it. Don't discount what's happening to you now. Does that make sense? All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. I will see you guys in a couple of weeks. Have a great week.